Running into groggy grizzlies, a hunger for huckleberries, and standing your ground no matter how scared you are. Glacier National Park is a hiker's paradise, but when they close a particular trail, it's for a good reason. While it might seem like part of the fun of hiking Huckleberry Lookout Trail would be picking a handful of right-off-the-bush huckleberries to enjoy along the walk, trail closures often coincide with peak huckleberry season. That's from the middle of July to the middle of September, and although it seems like that's kind of a bummer, there's a very, very good reason for those closures. As Glacier National Park Supervisory Ranger Gary Moss explained to Backpacker, large numbers of bears congregate there when there's a bumper crop. Humans aren't the only ones who love those oh-so-delicious huckleberries, and according to research done by the National Park Service, it's estimated that the park's bears rely on Montana's beloved berry for as much as 15% of their diet. It's worth mentioning, too, that Glacier National Park isn't just home to a few bears. Although exact numbers are unknown, the NPS estimates there are somewhere around 1,000 bears living in the park. Sure, bears can be adorable, but they also come with massive claws and even bigger appetites. And yes, there have been incidents where hikers have run into bears along the trail. In July 2020, the National Park Service issued a warning bulletin that a woman who had been jogging along Huckleberry Lookout Trail had surprised a grizzly bear. She physically ran into the bear and they fell off the trail in a heap that had to have been pretty terrifying. Thankfully, the bear ran off, but that hasn't always happened. In 2016, a park employee was on the trail picking huckleberries when she had a run-in with a grizzly and walked away with severe but non-fatal injuries. The most devastating tragedy played out in 1998 when an ill-advised seasonal employee set out with the goal of getting up close and personal with the park's bears. Craig Dahl disappeared in May amid warnings that very hungry bears were in the process of emerging from hibernation, and his remains were discovered a few days later. Non-fatal bear attacks do happen annually, so bottom line, rangers know what's what, the threat is real, and visitors should always follow posted signs and listen to warnings. After Craig Dahl's remains were discovered in Glacier National Park, park rangers and law enforcement wanted to know what happened. So they turned to a surprising resource that was available thanks to Blackfeet tribe wildlife biologist Daniel Carney. Carney had spent the prior 3 years tagging Glacier Park grizzlies, taking hair samples, and cataloging the bear's DNA. Thanks to Carney's database, the bears who had at least partially eaten Dahl's remains were identified when DNA extracted from nearby droppings was matched to a female grizzly nicknamed Chocolate Legs. She was well known to park employees as she had first become troublesome at just 18 months old. That's when she was found to be regularly approaching park visitors, which was already a bad sign. Still, rangers tried to save her and minimize the danger, so she was captured and relocated 20 miles away. For a while, it seemed like everything was fine, but she was seen approaching people again in 1997, and after Dahl's death, Chocolate Legs and her cubs were killed.
And what we have now is a revolving door where bears come and they get into trouble and they're either moved or they're destroyed.
Chris Servine, bear expert for the United States Fish and Wildlife Service, explained to the New York Times that since the cubs had presumably seen their mother kill a human, they were at risk as well, saying, "Offspring learn from their mother, and since they were involved in pursuing and eating a human, those offspring were likely to do it again." The occasional closures of Huckleberry Lookout Trail aren't just as simple as trying to prevent tourists from being attacked and eaten by bears. It's also a fascinating opportunity to take a closer look at just how interconnected wildlife is. Two kinds of bears live in Glacier National Park, black bears and grizzly bears. It's impossible to tell the difference between the two by color alone, as both can range in color from pale blonde to red and brown to black. The bear's shape is a better indicator, as a grizzly has a telltale hump. Both types are omnivores, which means that not only do they love huckleberries, but they'll scarf down a person too. And yes, if you're thinking it, the NPS confirms that black bears do in fact love honey. And no, this does not make them more approachable. Park researchers have found that the bear-huckleberry relationship is a mutually beneficial one. The bears get a meal, but huckleberry seeds remain viable through the bear's digestive system, which means the huckleberries get spread as far as the bears wander. Huckleberries, meanwhile, are considered an invaluable part of the ecosystem. They are incredibly hardy and often among the first plants to reestablish the ecosystem after a forest fire, and they're an invaluable food source for other species as well. It's a win-win. So here's a terrifying tidbit. Those fluffy, sometimes adorable bears that live in Glacier National Park can reach speeds of up to 35 miles per hour. In other words, puny humans aren't going to be outrunning them anytime soon. It makes sense then that the National Park Service has several guidelines put in place for avoiding bears, and obeying trail closures almost goes without saying. There are some that border on common sense, like not stopping near bears and remaining a safe distance away. Traveling in groups is another one, but there's an interesting tidbit that goes along with that. Glacier National Park has never had any bear attacks that involve a group of 4 or more people. Others are a little less intuitive and include directions that say whatever you do, you shouldn't run, before or after meeting a bear. Running on trails increases the chance that you'll stumble on one in a very bad way, and running away from a bear that's already locked on isn't going to work out well for the human half of the conflict. Also, keep food secure and be aware of your surroundings, particularly bear-friendly streams and berry patches, exactly like those that line the Huckleberry Lookout Trail. Bears obviously go wherever they please, and even closing trails is not always enough to make sure they don't cross paths with people. That's one reason why the National Park Service advises carrying bear spray while you're in their territory, and there are a few things to know here. For starters, even though it works on the same principles and ingredients as pepper spray, it generally contains about 2% capsaicin, and it's about 3 times hotter. That makes it stronger, more potent, and more effective over a wider area. Spraying a bear has about the same impact as spraying someone in the face with pepper spray, and that's what gives a soft, squishy, and relatively slow human the chance to get away. But there's another benefit here too. As Chris Servine of the United States Fish and Wildlife Service explained to the Washington Post, the spray teaches avoidance of humans without killing the bear, so the behavior can then be passed along. Mama bears teach their cubs it's better to just stay away from people, and that's the ideal situation.
The most important thing about bear spray is knowing how to use it.
If you ever have to use bear spray, have the can at the ready when the bear gets within 50 feet, but don't use it just yet. It's most effective when they're between 20 and 30 feet away. Just the sight of the can is oftentimes enough to discourage the curious, the hungry, and sometimes even the angriest bears. Ideally, the National Park Service doesn't intervene with the wildlife they oversee and protect at all. They're there in part to make sure that nature is still allowed to take an oftentimes cruel course while still letting visitors get a glimpse of that process. But there are some times when they're required to step in. One of those times is when human lives are in danger. When bears come into close contact with people too often, that's precisely what happens. While the first choice is to chase animals away and reinforce the idea that humans are bad, that doesn't always work. In 2017, for example, Yellowstone authorities euthanized a grizzly that had started wandering into campsites, harassing people, destroying property, and stealing food. A similar situation played out in Grand Teton National Park in 2021, when a grizzly the NPS described as, quote, highly food conditioned was euthanized. And an even more heartbreaking situation was reported in 2019 when wildlife authorities in Oregon euthanized a black bear that was so regularly being fed that people could take selfies with it. Had people left the bear alone, they would have relocated it. So bottom line, closing trails like Huckleberry Lookout during times when there's a high likelihood of bear activity isn't just to protect people who might startle a hungry bear. It's also to protect bears and keep them from learning that humans aren't as scary as they seem. It never ends well, especially for the bear. Being hopelessly lost in a national park with no phone and no shoes is definitely up there on the list of bad days. That's what happened to 19-year-old Matthew Reed in May of 2023. He was hiking Glacier National Park's Huckleberry Lookout Trail alone when he slipped, fell, and was unable to climb back onto the trail. So he started heading down and was only found the following day after search and rescue parties picked up his heat signature. After Reed was reported missing, authorities closed the trail while they searched for him. And it makes sense. Search and rescue operations are extensive, and the last thing rescuers need is more hikers stumbling into a search area. KRTV reported that after park rangers failed to find him in an initial search, it expanded to 30 volunteers, the U.S. Border Patrol, the Sheriff's Office, a helicopter, and search and rescue dogs. And that was for one person.
I just cannot say enough from the bottom of my heart how grateful and thankful I am for all of you.
The moral of the story? The news could be a lot worse than finding out the trail you've been planning on hiking is closed for the day. It's a little unclear just how many people are reported missing from the country's national parks each and every year. But when the New York Post filed a request for numbers, they found that between 2018 and 2023, at least 1,180 people were reported as going missing. In other words, respect closed trails.